Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives, as well as other matters of national importance. I'm Vanessa Silvera. Today's discussion is about child protection, in particular, eliminating violence against children. For the next couple of minutes, I will be speaking with UN Special Representative of the Secretary General, that's the SRSG, on violence against children, Dr. Najat Mala Mjid, to get her perspective on the issue and the way forward. Welcome. It is a pleasure to have you on our program, Dr.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure for me to be here.
Many countries have adopted the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. But violence against children continues to undermine the successful implementation of these goals and the 2030 Agenda. Now, give us a synopsis based on available reports of what the situation is like for children globally and what exactly is needed if we are to create change and achieve these development goals.
Less than 7 years remain to achieve the Agenda 2030 and the 17 Sustainable Development Goal. And less than 7 years remain to keep the promise we made. Ending all forms of violence against children in all settings by 2030. To be very frank with you, many countries are lagging behind. And I'm not sure that we are going, if we continue like that, to really keep our promise because of, first, the socio-economic impact of the pandemic, the ongoing humanitarian crisis, conflict, climate crisis, the global financial crisis, and the huge displacement of children worldwide due to conflict, due to widespread violence, due to climate crisis. And most importantly, the fact that all the policies, the commitments are really not effectively and duly translated in services that are accessible to all children without discrimination, leaving no one behind, as we promise in the Agenda 2030. So what is needed is to build on these lessons and to switch from this siloed approach and this initiative approach that are not sustainable to really build cross-sectoral child and gender-sensitive services, when children can find directly and immediately access to protection, to justice, to health, to social protection, to all these services they need in a very prompt way. And this is a big issue for the moment. The other thing is really due to fiscal constraint and to the budget, we are seeing that the investment in services for children and more widely social services are really currently facing some constraints. And all the states, and mainly the ministries of finance, have to see that not as additional, social expenses, but really as investments, in economic growth, in human capital. Because just to let you know, that violence against children is costing, 5% of the national GDP and 8% of global GDP. So it means that it makes economic sense
to end violence against children in all its forms. Now, Dr. Mjid, your visit in Jamaica is on the invitation of the government, and it aims to build on the strong political commitment and important strides already made by Jamaica to end violence against children. So, first, you mentioned the silos. How do we remove the barriers and stop working in silos?
We have to see protection of children as a cross-cutting issue. It's not belonging to one minister, because what is really important to understand what we mean by protection. It's administrative protection, it's judicial protection, it's really social protection. It means that all the key actors have a piece in protection. So it cannot be under only one minister. What is important is really to build, to really design what is a package of services needed for these children and who is delivering what and when it is delivered and who is accountable on what. I think it's possible because some countries made it. And I think regarding Jamaica, because you are highlighting Jamaica, since I arrived, what I am seeing is really, the big concern regarding the increase of crimes, the increase of violence against children, peer-to-peer violence. So if there is a concern, instead of being reactive, I think what is important, it has to become really a strong national priority. And here mobilizing all the key stakeholders around this issue and making them accountable because it's a chain of services. I just want to provide you a quick example. You can have a strong response in school. Right. But if in police or in justice is not going well, the protection is not efficient.
All right. We'll have to take a break. Very interesting our discussion here on protecting children and ensuring that their rights are promoted and protected. You are watching Get the Facts. Don't go anywhere.
As a nurse, my heart bleed for see the accident victims. Worse when blood and oxygen short. Ease the burden on our hospitals, no man. Please me I beg you no. Drive safe pon the road.
Welcome back to Get the Facts. We're continuing our conversation with Dr. Najat. She is the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children. The subject matter is child protection. In particular, eliminating violence against children. Now, Dr. Najat, you've been in the island, as I said before, for about 4 days. All right, so tell us, what are some of the programs you've witnessed and what positive impacts have you seen that you'll be able to take away?
I think I just want to start by really highlighting the strong political commitment that I saw at political level, even at high level, but also strong commitment and involvement, regarding, the program I visit, those who are really heading the agencies to deliver services for children and family, for girls who are pregnant, for children with disabilities. I had also I witnessed the strong also commitment of all the other key actors like, civil society and faith-based organization. You have wonderful programs regarding, taking care of some pieces like parenting, like psychosocial support, like sheltering, like protecting, like, fighting violence against children. I was attending the launch of all this campaign regarding violence inside school and within school. But I want to insist the most key important take-up I want to want to bring with me is a wonderful, commitment and energy and of children and young people. And they were wonderful because even they are you have a wonderful potential, very frankly, regarding they are committed, they are taking initiative. Despite all the challenges they are facing,
yes.
They are doing and they are still trust in it. But in the same time, I need to insist on one point. What is important also, the siloed approach, the lack of coordination, the lack of, always being reactive and not proactive,
yes,
was shared by all, and I think this is important. And that currently they are trying to tackle it and to put it, at a national level and to make sure that you have this chain of services in all places. I think this is very important. The other point I want to highlight, if you allow me,
sure,
I think we have to be very careful regarding, the culture, speaking about culture of violence. And I think no culture is deeply violent, to be very, this made me having concern when we are speaking about culture of violence. I think, we can change behavior.
Of course.
And no child, we cannot tell all children are good and all children are no bad. So we have to be very, very careful about dealing. Even when you have a peer-to-peer violence, we need to understand why we arrive at this stage. And I think need to listen to them and to assess, their, to take into account their assessment. Because and this is based on all the countries I visited and all my previous experiences, you have to be very careful when you have the hopelessness and the loss of sense of belonging to a community.
Yes.
This is a driver of violence. So you need to act quickly, faster, differently, for and with children on board.
You mentioned COVID-19 earlier. We've gone through 2 years of the global pandemic. What ought to be the focus of the interventions going forward? Can it be the same as we've done before in previous years prior to the pandemic?
Now, I think we need to build on the lessons learned. First, come back to school, and the return to school have to take into account that you have a disruption of schooling during at least 2 years, almost 2 years. And all the impacts of this isolation on mental health, on learning, on many children who are victims of the domestic violence, witnessing also intimate partner violence.
Yes.
Online also, don't forget also all this exposure online. And all this isolation, and they had many, many mental health issues,
And we've seen it in the classrooms.
Yes, and many mental health issues. So coming back to school, and currently they return to school, hopefully, we need to take into account that these children were affected. So the teacher need to be really well staffed, well trained. As the school counselor need to be listened and need really to make sure that they can early detect signs, of distress, of thinking something is going wrong. And this, I think, it's really important. The early warning and listening of children and listening to children is really, really important. And having, in the same time, I discussed with the Ministry of Education also, is really making sure that they have a kind of child and gender sensitive mechanism where they can report. And just to not forget, school is linked to communities.
It is.
And because of the socioeconomic impact, of the pandemic, you have many, many families who were already vulnerable that became more and more vulnerable. And vulnerability expose also children to violence and expose children to dropout and so on. And I think this is very important to take into account currently, the importance of investing in mental health and psychosocial support, social protection, parenting, really strengthening the capacities of all the front line, of workforce to make sure that they can early detect, they can react, they can provide the required support, in school, around school, and in the community. And the most important thing, allow me, is really to involve and to make children part of the solution and to make them on board.
Now, before we wrap, one last question. How important is legislation and public education? You mentioned training, and you really did stress training. How important is legislative change and public education to effecting this revolution that we need?
Legislation is important because it provides a framework. And it has to be in line with all the commitments made by states, because you are part of the Convention on Children's Rights, and I know that you are currently going to ratify the Hague Convention on Inter-Country Adoption to make sure also that you are regulating all the international adoption. So this is important to make sure if you need a legal framework. But what is most to really end all forms of violence against children and to provide alternative and to make sure that all the rights of children are really promoted and their best interests are taken into account. But the most important thing is having the legal framework is wonderful, but implementing it and making these children having access to child and gender sensitive, that is prompt, that is rapid, that is protecting children, and really making the perpetrator accountable, this is important.
Now, your final words as we wrap. You've given a lot to think about. What are your final words taking us out?
For me, I have just one message for all these children who are listening. Despite, the barriers, the challenges they face, never give up. Never give up, because you are the present, you are the future generation, and you are wonderful actors of change.
Thank you so very much. Wonderful words to close us out. This has been Get the Facts. Our guest was Dr. Najat Mahala Njid, the UN Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, who has been on an official 4-day visit to Jamaica. Thank you for watching. Until next time, I'm Vanessa Silvera. Take good care.